We're going to be covering an often polarizing topic, abortion, but there is a perspective that isn't just politics or policy. It's about building families and supporting abundant life for all.
That's right. Well, 23 states currently prohibit abortion after 12 weeks, and lawmakers and ministries in many of those states are taking action to support women with unplanned pregnancies. CBN's Paul Petit takes a closer look at how they're saving lives.
Yes, you good girl.
Like many women facing an unplanned pregnancy, Christina Mutter felt isolated and afraid.
I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? I'm scared. What are people going to think about this? How am I going to continue to work?
Ultimately, Christina chose to have her baby and received help making that decision at Open Arms Pregnancy Center in Huntsville, Arkansas.
As you think a new baby, you automatically think, I don't have enough. But really, God says that's an increase. You're increasing your family, you're increasing a person, so you're going to have more than enough.
The Pregnancy Center helps expectant moms by offering everything from free birth kits and baby clothes to parenting classes.
Last year with the grant, we gave, I think it was $1,500 in resources to different families. We gave 30 birth kits away. That would be to a new mom that doesn't have anything.
A large portion of funding for those items came from the state, which awarded the Pregnancy Center a $50,000 grant. Sharice Dean, a government liaison, helped make that happen.
We are not just an anti-abortion state. We are a pro-life state. So we thought, what's their biggest need? Their need is funding. So we went to the governor.
Arkansas is one of the most pro-life states in the country, and we want to keep it that way. But that also means that we need to help a lot of the new moms who are going through this process.
Arkansas provided $2 million in state grants in 2024 with the possibility of more in 2025. The money goes to pregnancy centers like Open Arms, as well as maternity homes, foster care, and adoption services.
So I think investing in programs like that allow us not just to say we're pro-life, but to really invest in helping protect and show the value that we place on it.
Arkansas is not the only state providing assistance. Louisiana and Arizona offer tax credits for adoption services.
My initial plan was actually to get an abortion. I had taken out a loan.
Texas takes a different approach. It awarded $2 million to the Brave Love campaign. Produced by a nonprofit called Modern Adoption Plans, these video testimonies encourage women to choose adoption over abortion.
We make sure we show that video, and then we have open discussion too of just even like what are the stigmas with adoption, what are the biases that come along with that, and I just feel like that's been super helpful for us having that tool in our toolbox.
The state found the campaign's impact showed 78% of women between the ages of 16 and 20 were more likely to consider adoption after watching the videos. Education on the benefits of adoption is behind a program that's now part of a mandatory health curriculum in Arkansas, Louisiana, and West Virginia high schools.
If you live in a great state with a great pro-life law, there's still all of this marketing and messaging getting to them about abortion drugs and this supposed easy quick fix of the abortion pill when it's anything but that. So we should, with just as much vigor and funding, be putting these adoption messages forward and reaching people of all ages.
The #1 legislative priority of Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America is a program called MedEd. They're targeting specific states to educate the public and doctors about emergency care available to pregnant women.
Because unfortunately, there has been this huge talking point amongst Democrats and the abortion lobby that if you live in a pro-life state and you're pregnant, that your life could be in danger because you're not going to be able to get miscarriage care or other things. These laws, and South Dakota was the first state to pass a law like this year, they provide that education, that clarity, and they stop that misinformation.
Innovation is at the center of Safe Haven baby boxes. The goal is to prevent infant abandonment by providing safe, legal places for mothers to anonymously surrender their babies.
When a baby is placed, we should all be celebrating the fact that this mother made a choice, a good choice, and that this baby's life is going to go on.
Since Monica installed the first baby box in 2016 at an Indiana fire station, nearly 300 boxes have been put in 21 states. This year, another 15 states introduced baby box-related legislation.
Bring this to the parents that want anonymity. And but the states that have the baby boxes, we're seeing abandonment rates drop across this country.
Even though pro-life states remain in the minority, the impact of supporting mothers in crisis is felt with each baby saved.
I don't think I'd be in the place that I am if I wouldn't have found this center and came here and received the support and love I did.
Having those options available to women in that vulnerable moment is what helps women to decide to choose life.
Paul Petit, CBN News.
It's astounding to know that there are such thing as baby boxes, even right here in the U.S. You know, I've heard of those things in other countries, but right here in the U.S., it's really astounding. But, you know, something that I love about these crisis pregnancy centers is they not just provide support and help to moms as they're pregnant and making that decision, right, to keep their babies, to raise their children, or to even adopt. But, you know, for those who either choose adoption or choose to raise their children, they support the moms even after birth, which I think is so important. Yes, let's, you know, advocate for, you know, advocating and helping women to choose life, but also let's continue to help them because oftentimes it's that postpartum season, which is months and even a couple years into this child's life. They need support, they need diapers, they need financial support, they need therapy because let's not forget about postpartum depression, anxiety, all those things. And so I know that a lot of crisis pregnancy centers support that and support women in that way, which is important.
Yeah, and you heard the governor say it's not enough just to say we're pro-life,
Right.
but we need to show it. Roland Warren was a 20-year-old student at Princeton when his whole life changed in an instant. His girlfriend, also a student at Princeton, found out she was pregnant. The couple had a choice to make, and that choice shaped how Roland sees everything.
It's been more than 2 years since Roe v. Wade was overturned. But Americans, when given the choice, are choosing more abortions and more pro-choice laws, not fewer. So what's missing? Roland C. Warren, president and CEO of CareNet, says the answer isn't just being pro-life, it's something deeper, abundant life. And in his new book, The Alternative to Abortion, he explains exactly why.
All right, Roland, thanks for joining us. Your book is incredible. We appreciate your time today.
I was glad to be with you. Thanks so much for the interest.
You and your wife, before you were married, you found yourselves in an unplanned pregnancy while in college. So, I mean, that experience radically changed your life. How did it get you on mission? Tell us about it.
Well, you know, it really is interesting because I didn't know back then that God was actually planting the seeds for a pro-abundant life perspective because my wife, Yvette, found out she was pregnant. She was a sophomore at Princeton. I was a junior. And when she went to Student Health Services, the nurse said, well, gosh, how are you going to graduate from Princeton with a baby? And then moreover, what do you want to do when you graduate? Oh my gosh, you want to become a doctor. How are you going to become a doctor with a baby? And so, you know, she was confronted with that decision and we decided to get married. I was 20, she was 19. And so we got married and brought the child into the world. And when you think about it, that actually kind of framed the perspective that I have now on the life issue, that what you see happening in that moment is the same kind of call that happened when the most celebrated unplanned pregnancy that everybody knows, the birth of Christ, happened when Mary was confronted with an unplanned pregnancy from a human perspective and the role that Joseph played in all of that. So Mary didn't just say, listen, I'm going to just focus on the uncertainty of what I don't know. She focused on the certainty of what she did, that there was a life growing inside of her, and it wasn't a life worth sacrificing, but a life worth sacrificing for, and she chose life. And for a lot of folks in this movement, they'll say, well, God, oh, that's it. We're supposed to help the proverbial Marys and save the proverbial Jesuses. But what did God do to make sure Mary's unplanned pregnancy wasn't a crisis pregnancy? Send an angel to Joseph. And Joseph faced the same dilemma as any abortion-minded man. He was going to put her away quietly, divorce her quietly. That's the way you did an abortion back then, because you couldn't put the baby away. And Joseph was called to do two specific things: to be a husband to her and a father to the child growing inside him. So what you see in the birth of Christ, in the nativity narrative in the first chapter, the first book of the New Testament, is that when God had an unplanned pregnancy from a human perspective, what did he do? He created a family, a father and mother united in marriage, loving each other and loving God. And so I felt like as I started to write this book and think about the experience that I had as a 20-year-old, we essentially had that same call. I was called to tap into my inner Joseph. My wife Yvette was called to tap into her inner Mary for us to form a family. And that's exactly what we did. And so the sanctity of marriage and family is connected to the sanctity of life. And we should never delink those things because God didn't in the first chapter of the first book of the New Testament.
So, Roland, when we talk about the alternative to abortion, you make an interesting distinction. Why must we be pro-abundant life? What's the distinction between pro-life and pro-abundant life? How do they differ?
Yeah, well, one of the things you can ask yourself is, what does it actually mean to be pro-life? I mean, the term is, since we've given to the politics, you know, one guy says, look, I'm pro-life and I believe in Imago Dei, and that the circumstances of the child's conception and birth should not determine its humanity and worth. So whether you're conceived in love or lust or planned or unplanned or fetal abnormality, you're creating the image of God and worthy of life. Another person says, well, I'm pro-life too, but I'm for a 15-week ban. Okay, well, 15-week ban, 96% of abortions happen before 15 weeks. What about you? Well, I'm pro-life too, and I'm for a 20-week ban, pain capable. 99% of abortions happen before then. So what's happened to the term, actually, it's now on a spectrum. We took an absolute, if you will, in terms of life from God's perspective, and it's on a spectrum because we gave it to a political process which is focused on compromise more than conviction. Being pro-abundant life is actually anchored in John 10:10, where Christ said, I came that you might have life and have that life abundantly. And he's talking about two types of life: physical life, where the Greek word bios comes in, and then also zoe, which is a unique type of spiritual life that only comes from a relationship with God. So what Jesus is saying in that moment is, I came to link your bios to my zoe, that you might be heartbeats that are heaven bound. Now, you can be an atheist and be pro-life because you're solving for bios, which isn't a bad thing, but you're not solving for zoe. So what you see with Christ, he always saw for bios and zoe. And so I believe as Christians, if Jesus said, listen, I'm not pro-life, I'm pro-abundant life. Why? Because in John 10:10, he says that. And I believe that we should be pro-abundant life in every area, especially when it comes to the life issue. And so that's why I tell folks, I'm not pro-life, I'm pro-abundant life, because I'm linking my purpose for this issue to Jesus's wise statement. And when you do that, it anchors this issue in the church as opposed to anchoring in the politics, which is where I think a lot of the dilemma comes down.
So many well-intentioned believers often frame the issue just incorrectly. You think they don't maybe realize, or we don't realize, that we're taking the wrong approach. It's not a winning approach, so to speak.
Well, look, there are aspects certainly that have been very successful in terms of what we've done. I mean, there's lots of legislation, a lot of those things that happen. But this issue is not primarily a material support issue or primarily a political issue. It's primarily an issue of discipleship. It's where the Great Commandment and the Great Commission come together. See, in Luke 10:27, Jesus is asked by a lawyer who's focused on what? Advocacy, law. What must I do to inherit the kingdom of God? And what does Jesus say? What does the book say? Well, he says, love God with all your heart, your soul, your strength, and your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. When you look at that passage, the word that he uses for love is agapeo love, which is a sacrificial love. And the word for neighbor in the Greek means near one or near fellow. The child in the womb is the woman's near one. It's her nearest near one because it's near her in terms of proximity, and it's near her in terms of relationship, and also, too, for the guy who got her pregnant. It's bone of her bone and flesh of her flesh. So you can't be pro-choice as a Christian because it's a violation of the Great Commandment. And also, we're called to what? Live out the Great Commandment to fulfill the Great Commission. Well, abortion's a violation of the Great Commission. Why? Because we're called to make disciples of who? Our neighbors. Well, killing one of your children, your near one in the womb, is not an act of discipleship. So when you frame it through a pro-abundant life perspective, it's living out the Great Commandment to fulfill the Great Commission. That is not a narrative that's in the political space. In other words, I tell people all the time, we need to exchange the podium for the pulpit. See, the podium can have all kinds of perspectives coming from the podium. That's why when the president speaks, there's a seal there. And when he gets done speaking, they take the seal because the seal gives it gravitas. Well, this pulpit of the Church of Jesus Christ has a certain seal, a perspective that never loses the Imago Dei perspective in terms of what we're thinking about. And so when you take this issue and you give it primarily through a political lens, that you lose that pro-abundant life perspective. And that's why with a lot of Christians, if you ask them if they're pro-life and they say yes, and then you challenge them and ask them, say why, they tell you who they voted for. That means they're looking at the issue primarily through a political lens. A pro-life perspective is designed to lead you to the polls. A pro-abundant life perspective is designed to lead you to the cross. And we're supposed to go from the cross then to the polls. In other words, take the perspective of the cross to the polls. And what too many Christians are doing are taking the perspective of the polls to the cross. In other words, we're coming to the church with a sense of compromise around the life issue.
Okay, so if we take it to the cross, how can communities, families, individuals effectively support women and men when they face unexpected pregnancies?
The key here is really viewing it through the lens of discipleship. Water for the thirsty, food for the hungry, clothes for the naked, homes for the homeless. We understand those as on-ramps to discipleship. Well, compassion for the pregnant, it should be an on-ramp to discipleship. God used an unplanned pregnancy in Mary's life to an end, that she might become a disciple of Jesus Christ. Is that how you're thinking about the life issue? You see a woman facing a pregnancy decision. Your first thought, who do I need to vote for so that she can't have an abortion? Or what kind of material support does she need? Or is your first thought, you know what? I wonder if she's a disciple of Jesus Christ. The child growing inside of her needs to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. The guy who got her pregnant needs to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And that's why we have ministry platforms at CareNet, which folks can find at care-net.org. One of the key ones is Making Life Disciples. And that's a ministry approach that's designed to put a ministry in the church so that someone facing a pregnancy decision, either in the church or outside the church, can connect with a small group of folks in the church and be led through a discipleship mission. In other words, framing the life issue through the lens of discipleship. That means regardless of who's in the White House, it doesn't really matter in that context, because we know that this issue is a call to make disciples. Jesus used every single issue that he was faced with. This guy has too much blood. This woman has too much blood. This guy has too much pride. This one has too much money, too many demons, all these things. What did he do? He met them at their point of bios and then called them into a Zoe relationship. In other words, he met the physical need connected to the temporal, the eternal reality, and therefore called them into a discipleship relationship. And because we've allowed the politics to frame this, we view the issue outside of the biblical narrative that you see in Scripture. And so we think about it once every Sanctity of Life Sunday or something like that, as opposed to thinking about it every day, because every day we're called to make disciples of folks who are facing decisions that are difficult for them. And certainly this is one of the most difficult.
Well, Roland, you certainly have a unique brilliance and passion for this, and I appreciate you framing this for our audience and giving us practical steps. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Glad to be with you. Thanks so much for your interest.
All right, God bless. To learn more, everyone, about the alternative to abortion, get your hands on Roland's great, powerful book, The Alternative to Abortion, Why We Must Be Pro-Abundant Life. It's available wherever books are sold. And for more resources, visit RolandCwarren.com. Ashley.
Tiffany called Planned Parenthood from the parking lot to let them know she had arrived. She was scheduled to get an abortion, something both she and her fiancé had decided to do. But then Tiffany changed her mind after a voice told her to stop.
I thought that if God loved me, I would have this happy family. That wasn't what I had.
Growing up, Tiffany's relationship with her mom was very distant and at times tumultuous.
I just wanted us to have a close relationship. I wanted there to be like that support system, the emotional connection, but it was hard that it wasn't there. From what I knew, God, you're supposed to be the one that makes all this happen. Why did you make it happen like this for me? I was looking for someone to care about me.
A few years after high school and still feeling alone and unloved, Tiffany met a guy online.
His interest in me made me feel good. That, like, I have something to offer. I am worth something, and someone is interested.
Tiffany began attending her boyfriend's church, where his parents were the pastors.
It was exciting. It was nothing I knew. I started to see maybe where I could fit in the church and, being a part of it and helping out as a family member. At this time, I really started to try and learn about who God was and what living a Christian life looked like, because I started to want that.
8 months later, Tiffany's boyfriend proposed. But soon after, Tiffany was informed that the relationship was creating division between her fiancé and his family.
There was a lot of fear. Nobody wants their relationship to end. I was just wanting to be chosen. Like, choose me.
As Tiffany and her fiancé navigated a rocky engagement, Tiffany discovered they were pregnant, deepening her fear for their relationship.
I was nervous. I was scared to tell him. I didn't know how he was going to react. He immediately went, what are my parents going to say? What are we going to do? How is this going to look? What are they going to think? We both came to the conclusion that abortion was an option.
After making an appointment at Planned Parenthood, Tiffany grew distant towards God.
I wasn't praying because I knew what we were considering wasn't right, wasn't biblical.
As the appointment drew near, Tiffany began to have a change of heart.
I started to talk with him about how we're already engaged. We planned on getting married and having a family. Why is this so bad? Why is this so terrible? We're just doing it sooner. He was just ashamed and fearful of how it looked to his family.
Sitting together outside the abortion clinic, Tiffany called to let them know she had arrived. Due to COVID, the nurse began to explain the process over the phone to her.
I said that I needed a minute, and I hung up the phone, and I was weeping, just saying, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. I knew so deeply that I was not supposed to get an abortion, and that God was there. Like, I just knew that God was here right now saying, do not do this, I will be here. And so we're both just sitting in the car, and he's just looking at me. And he looks angry. And I said, I don't want to do this. And he said, well, I don't want to have this baby, but it's your body. There was no comfort. There was no care. He just wanted to make it go away.
Several days later, Tiffany found CareNet, a faith-based crisis pregnancy center, while searching online for free ultrasounds.
I'm laying there and the screen is in front of you, and all of a sudden this baby pops up and I just see a hand that starts waving at me. And right then it was just real. And I lost it, obviously. I started crying and I just accepted, like, that's my child right there.
After seeing their baby, Tiffany and her fiance broke the news to his parents.
I just thought that there would be some type of, like, you did the right thing or you made the right choice. And instead, there was just kind of a extreme shame and condemnation that I was even pregnant. My fiance at the time and I didn't really talk for a few days. And then we did, and the engagement was off.
Soon after, Tiffany was asked not to return to their church.
I knew that I was supposed to keep this baby. I knew what I had heard from God. I knew that I was making the right choice, and I didn't understand why everything around me was falling apart. I was asking myself, what does the future look like? And how am I supposed to do this alone?
Feeling helpless, Tiffany heard from God to reach out to her friends David and Tammy, who prayed for her and invited Tiffany to come to their church.
It didn't make sense to me how I had just went through what I did with my church to just then be so welcomed and loved into a new one.
CareNet continued to provide free medical care, baby supplies, and prayer during and after Tiffany's pregnancy.
I was so grateful to God because he was tangibly showing me that he was going to be there, because he was surrounding me with people that cared and that were there, present.
As Tiffany continued to trust and walk with the Lord, her relationship with God was transforming.
He gave me a vision, and I was standing in a dirt grave, and his arm reached in and pulled me out. The day that he spoke to me in the parking lot, he saved not only my daughter's life, but mine as well. And from then on, I chose to follow him.
On June 11th, 2021, Tiffany met her daughter, Ren.
It's like your heart is outside of your body. Like you just love this little thing that you just met, that you've been carrying for months. I was so thankful to God. My daughter is the biggest blessing to me, and to think of how much I love her as a parent, I can't even describe the love that God has for us as a parent. That's a love like I've never experienced before.
This story is just absolutely amazing. You know, and I just commend Tiffany for the courage she had. You know, she had the appointment scheduled to have an abortion, but she heard the voice of God And she knew deep down this is not what she was supposed to do. And she had the courage to walk away. And God gave her the courage and the boldness to make the choice where there were naysayers and people who told her to not make the choice, to keep the baby inside her womb. And I'm just reminded of God's love today, but not just his love, but his forgiveness and his grace and his mercy that Tiffany experienced. And if you're watching this today and I don't know, maybe you're on the fence about what to do, you are also in a similar situation. Listen, motherhood is hard and holy work. Babies are a blessing. They are not a burden. They are a blessing. And the life inside your womb is sacred. It is sacred. So choose abundant life today. We're not asking you from a political stance to choose life. No, we're asking you from a biblical stance to choose abundant life, not just for the womb, for the life inside of you, but for you as well. God has abundant life for you. Just say yes to Jesus and you will experience not only life, but forgiveness and grace and mercy. All right, everyone, well, we leave you with these words from John 10, I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly.